We continue in this session in Genesis 42 again, verses 18 to 23. And here, the title of this section is simply Consciences Awakened. So verses 18 to 23. Now the penalty of spying, as it always has been, was death. In an apparent show of mercy. Now remember, the Joseph's brothers were in jail now for 3 years, 3 days. And they weren't just in any jail. They were probably in the prison that Joseph had run. Very notorious, very bad. In fact, it was probably more like a dungeon. So, in an apparent show of mercy, Joseph said to them on the third day, "This do and live, for I fear God." Basically, what he was saying to his brothers, I am a worshiper of the true God, and you have nothing to fear if you do what I tell you to do. He continues, if you be true men, let one of your brothers be bound in the house of your prison. Go, carry corn for the famine of your houses. Because he was charging them for being spies, someone had to remain in prison to be a scapegoat. So in an apparent show of mercy, he allowed 9 of them to return home with the supply of grain for which they had paid, so their relatives would survive the famine. Actually, Joseph was not willing to detain them any longer in his concern for his father and his family in Egypt. Not Egypt, Canaan. Sorry, I'm just confused. I'm recording this late at night. Then he added, but bring your youngest brother unto me. So shall your words be verified, and you will not die. There it is again. They were caught for espionage, for spying. And of course, dying is the penalty for spying. In no uncertain terms, Joseph told them that the only way, that only if they brought their youngest brother back with them, he would be convinced that they came only to buy grain and would not be put to death as spies. Wow. He really laid heavy on them, didn't he? So, verse 20 closes with, and they did so. They chose to comply with the governor's wishes, leaving one of them there, bringing the grain back home. So, at the same time as they made that decision, it continues. And they said one to another, we are really, truly guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us and we would not hear. therefore is this distress come upon us. It was clearly a poignant moment when all 10 brothers suddenly showed deep remorse of how they had treated their brother Joseph. It says, we saw the anguish of his soul. They turned a deaf ear to all his agonizing cries and entreaties. His crying out that they shouldn't throw him into the pit. His cries of protest as they removed and stripped him of his colorful garment. We saw the anguish of his soul, and they hardened themselves against him. You know, their consciences awoke suddenly by being stuck in that notorious prison. You know, they were only 3 days in one of the most notorious prisons in Egypt and thought that God was paying them back. Only 3 days. My goodness, they really must have lived sheltered lives if they thought this was bad. This is the environment that Joseph was in, at least for 5 years. And Reuben answered them, saying, spoke I not unto you, saying, do not sin against the child, and you wouldn't listen? Therefore, behold, also his blood is required. Back in Genesis 37:22, what Reuben actually said was, let us not kill him, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand on him. Reuben thought for sure Joseph was dead. Now they must suffer for it as a just retaliation in being threatened with death unless they could clear themselves. In a previous session, I said 9 out of those 10 were just going to have him murdered. Well, Reuben was not one of those 10. He tried to stop them. And here he reminded them, look, did I tell you not to do that? If you recall the story in chapter 37, Reuben snuck back to the pit, trying to get Joseph out, and Joseph was gone, sold. All this they discussed in front of Joseph. And they did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke unto them with an interpreter. You know, this was wise thinking on Joseph's part. This way Joseph could really discover their true, unfiltered dialogue and character. Folks, I want to close with these 2 thoughts. There is no question the 10 brothers felt remorse for their sinful past. But do you realize remorse is merely a condition of the conscience that makes one feel sorry for evil deeds done without any change of personality, without any change of character. Remorse is when they feel that they've been caught and they're being held accountable. But what Joseph really wanted to find out, remember, he's about 39 years old. He's already quite experienced in human nature and manipulating people. What Joseph really wanted to find out is whether his brothers had repented of their past deeds. Folks, repentance is not just feeling sorry for having done wrong, but it involves a 180-degree turn in behavior, and it involves a change in personality. You know, it's reasonable to assume this process was already evident in Joseph's brothers. And that's today's thought.